Good morning, friends. May 20th. Welcome again to another edition of my podcast, Johnny W. Bread TV. Thank you for joining me, and let's get started. Beautiful day, by the way, in New England. Today I'd like to talk about the idea of narratives and how narratives are something we seem to instinctively do regarding those things that are important to us. Our ideas, so to speak, our philosophies or ideologies or our religious convictions. I guess an example of this would be in the political realm, presidential politics. We may have a guy we like, a horse who's important to us, or one we definitely don't want to see in office, and we construct a narrative about him that has so many layers to it. An example would be that there was a lot of displeasure, even hatred, about the George Bush presidency. Some people thought he was elected in a way that was not right. They think the Florida elections were invalid, whatever they think. And because of this, they constructed a narrative such as, Bush lied, people died. They totally think Bush was responsible, not only for the war in Iraq, but many even, will take the most hardened case scenario that Bush was responsible for the planes that went into the buildings on 9/11. And no matter how you try to use reason to convince these people, they're just not going to believe that because they have their narrative, and their narrative is going to stick with them no matter what. So it's almost pointless to get into a discussion with these people who formulated a narrative. It's almost like facts shouldn't get in the way of a narrative. This can also be true of people on the other side, people who want Barack Obama to come off as the worst president in history. Not only is he a Marxist, he's the worst Marxist imaginable. He never tells the truth. They also think he's illegitimate because they don't believe for a minute that he was actually born in this country. No matter what evidence you could gather to make these people question these things, they're simply not going to question it. And the reason is it doesn't fit the narrative. Narratives are interesting because in a lot of cases, they're good. I was thinking of one recently, and it's a Christian one. But even though it's good, and it's still potentially dangerous, and I'll explain why in a minute. One Christian writer wrote a great little soundbite, so to speak, a couple of paragraphs about there's groups of Christians who want to be hipper than thou. And he makes a point about, Christianity having this new set of Christian leaders, Christian churches that are really, big into rock music, guys having tattoos and other things, and he calls this the hipper than thou generation of Christianity, and he tries to equate this with worldliness. This is not really godliness; it's worldliness. And in a lot of ways, I think because there's this appeal to reach a non-Christian audience, that a lot of Christianity is catering in a way that may make them appear, at least, to be engaging in the world on its terms rather than on God's terms. And you almost wonder if you can be Christian and hip at the same time. And I think that's a good narrative in a sense, because I think we should be suspicious of Christians who are overly hip. But here's where I think the narrative breaks down. I've known some people who are very strong, button-down Christians, go to, conservative churches. They wear, what's considered conservative clothing, and they're not trying to be hip. They're trying to, be mainstream Christians. Yet they would like, rock music, and, some people, Christians I know really like Pink Floyd. Now, Pink Floyd is clearly not Frank Sinatra. And I don't think the fans of Pink Floyd, even in Christian circles, would want them to try to be Frank Sinatra, a more acceptable vocalist. Pink Floyd is who they are because they're Pink Floyd and they're edgy, and I think they're great at being Pink Floyd. The question I would have to those who dislike the hip movement, and believe me, there are a lot of Elvis impersonators, but there really wasn't Elvis. And I know hip is subjective, but like other things in life, like obscenity, I think I know it when I see it. And I think a lot of Christians, if they're honest, will acknowledge there are people who have that certain it component, that hipness to them, that freshness. And the reason they're popular is because they got it. And it's genuine. Does God work with these people as well? Would God want somebody who just for whatever reason he's hip. He's not faking it. He just hips his personality. Would God want him now to become less hip now that he's a Christian? Would God want him to fit in to the button-down type of Christianity that seems so acceptable to the masses and to conventional Christian thought? Like I said, I'm not discounting the fact that many who may be hip may do that at the expense of orthodoxy, which I don't think is good. But let me ask an honest question to those people who criticize hip Christians. If somebody is a hip Christian and they have most of their T's crossed and most of their I's dotted, according to the satisfaction of the gatekeepers of pure doctrine, or just the way things should be done, are they going to get it treated differently than some guy who may actually think the same way as they do, may not also have their I's totally dotted or T's crossed, but most of them? Is the conventional Christian critique going to be different against the guy who wears a suit and tie, seems to fit in more, as opposed to the guy who's a little on the outskirts? He may, not be so buttoned down. I think the honest answer is the guy who's hip, using that word loosely, is going to be greeted with more suspicion. Everything he does is going to be scrutinized. I don't think this is fair. And I think the reason this happens is because of the narrative. The narrative, by and large, is right. We don't want too many Christian hipsters. Doesn't mean we can't have any Christian hipsters. People are who they are. And if a person is not being a fake or trying to be hip, but they just happen to whatever reason that they are hip, then let them be hip. And and another thing is, because these people who are hip may actually be greeted by the masses with greater excitement, could it be that we are critiquing them for their mass appeal? Not so much because they're not as orthodox, or maybe not because they're watering down the message, but maybe because in some way we're a little jealous, or those who are more orthodox, more conventional, don't like the fact that somebody can write a book in a way that, or in a tone that is really kind of something that they don't understand. It's definitely more colorful, better anecdotes. They just seem to have a better pulse on the world and how people think than those who actually may write very, very well, very clear and concise, maybe theologically sound, but it just doesn't catch on like to a postmodern audience. We're not here necessarily as Christians to engage a postmodern audience on their terms, but it's not always bad if somebody is able to appeal to a postmodern crowd, a postmodern audience, in a way, because they have certain aspects to their personality that seem postmodern, or maybe even are, yet they do stand up ultimately for the truth. And that's what's really important. The truth and the facts are more important than the narrative. Yet too often we're uncomfortable with getting off the narrative road. And because of that, I think we miss out. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day. Johnny W. Bread. Enjoying this sunny day, and hope to see you again next week. So long.